The Kisan Morcha, which is the umbrella body for 40 farmer unions, and they have been protesting at the Singhu border for months now, almost 7 months. They have announced that the farmers are now returning from Punjab after the harvesting season has been completed to the Singhu and Tikri borders. After the 26 January violence, there was a certain dilution in the number of farmers that were present at the Singhu border. Many of them went back. In fact, the Ghazipur border was even opened for traffic temporarily in between. So now the farmers are coming back. So in the sense, we're looking at Farmer Protest 2.0, which is not going to be about Republic Day violence. It seems to be, everyone seems to have forgotten it, which will not be about the kind of rampage all these people went on Republic Day in the capital, because everyone seems to have forgotten that. But again, these guys somehow have found the audacity to come back for another round of protests, and that is what we are going to look at, that why are they coming back to the protest, not from a political reason, but from a policy reason. Now, if I talk about the demands, the two demands these farmers have, one is a law that legalizes MSP, and second is the repeal of the farm laws. Now, let's come to the second aspect first. They want a repeal to the farm laws because, one, they encourage private sector's participation into agriculture. Now, I've been busting this myth for a very, very long time that in India, private sector is already engaged in a lot of agricultural activities. It's involved in livestock, farming, fishing, things like that. 6% of crops or agricultural produce in India, 6% of agriculture produce in India, rather not crops, are only covered under MSP, and that too just 22 crops. So your fruits and vegetables are outside the purview of MSP. Your livestock, your fisheries, all of it's outside the purview of MSP. Dairy is outside the purview of MSP. So it's not like private sector has not already been participating in the agriculture sector. So this demand of the farmers that private sector participation needs to be curtailed, the laws that encourage that need to be repealed, is very irrational, because at the end we're just talking about 6% of the agriculture produce. The problem is a majority of this 6% comes from Punjab. So the Punjab farmers are up in arms, and that is why they want these laws to be repealed. Now, the first demand is that let's have a legalized status for the MSP. Now, if you have a legalized status for the MSP, there are a lot of problems that will crop up. Firstly, why should then Punjab be the center of majority procurement? Why shouldn't the procurement be tied to a state benchmark? Say UP, which is 5 times bigger than Punjab, if it's growing the same crop as Punjab, say wheat, the procurement should be perhaps 5 times that of Punjab. So you'll have to go by a state benchmark when it comes to the procurement, because then legalizing the MSP, which will essentially be a government handout, basically think of it as a direct cash transfer, that shouldn't be tied to one state's fortunes. It should be, equitably distributed. This is going to be the first problem. The second problem is, where do you draw the line? If tomorrow someone who owns let's say an orchard in Himachal wants an MSP on his crop and they start protesting, someone in the fisheries may start protesting, because everyone wants a minimum support price. So all of them, afraid of either inflation or an unpredictable demand, may start asking for MSP. So the problem is, where do you draw the line? And that is why legalizing MSP is a huge challenge, and I won't even get into the fiscal problems of it. But another very important policy step was taken in Punjab earlier this year in March. The Food Corporation of India, which procures heavily from the state, stated that for the procurement to happen in this rabi marketing season, the farmers' land records will have to be given, and direct benefit transfers would be made for the payment. The payment would not go through the arthiyas, which are the middlemen. The middlemen sat at protests. They sat at protests in Chandigarh, in Punjab, outside the CM's office. And the CM of Punjab, Captain Amarinder Singh, he also came out in the backing of these arthiyas, of these middlemen. He said that they should be given some rights. They should be, allowed to be a part of the payment process. Such was the backing of the CMO of Punjab that arthiyas were going around collecting blank checks from the farmers. So when the payment came into their bank accounts, they could fill in whatever amount they desired and withdraw that amount from the farmer's bank account. Such was the backing and the audacity of these middlemen. And now these middlemen are leading these protests in Singhu and Tikri borders. But why are these middlemen so important, or rather self-proclaiming themselves to be so important in this entire payment process? Well, if you go by the numbers, in the rabi season 21-22, 90% of the crops that are 90% of the paddy that will be grown in Punjab is estimated to be procured. If you go by the past trends also, in 2017-18, 66% of the wheat that was grown in Punjab was procured by some agency. 90% of the paddy that was grown in Punjab was also procured. So these are the rough estimates as to how the procurement will be. If you go by the rabi marketing season of 2019-20, for 40.37 lakh metric ton of paddy, 15.7 lakh metric ton came from Punjab. So up to 40 lakh metric ton, close to 15 lakh metric ton came from Punjab. For 2020-21, of the 38.66 lakh metric ton of paddy, 14.2 lakh metric ton came from Punjab. So the idea is Punjab sees a majority of the procurement. The government since 2012, the center government, which was also of the UPA too, was trying to ensure that Punjab follows that direct benefit transfer model. The middlemen were resisting. They said that 20,000 middlemen are easier to deal with, say 1.2 farmer families. And they have been resisting this move for a long time. But it's good for the farmers for a lot of reasons. Firstly, they get the income in their bank accounts directly. If other stakeholders across the country can get their DBTs, why should the farmers of Punjab be left behind? But so far, Punjab was the last state, even with all its prosperity and progress and rather literate farmers, it was the last state to actually implement DBTs. This is for one simple reason, the debt trap. Now, the middlemen are pretty smart here. What they do, they develop a relationship with the farmers, and it's very common. This is not something which is happening just now or the last 7 years or 10 years or 15 years. It's been common since time, it's a very long time. So what they do, they essentially lent out informal credit to these farmers. Say some farmer wants money for his daughter's marriage, for some treatment, for buying something, an automobile, a car, a scooter, a tractor, whatever. They lend out informal credit. Now, this is informal credit, so it's given at a very high rate of interest, somewhere in the neighborhood of 30%, as some books I read actually quoted. They're given out at interest of 30%. Now, what happens? Compounded annually, the interest keeps increasing, so farmer ends up paying mostly the interest. The principal stays there, and every year, on that same principle, the interest starts increasing. And if some farmer, for some reason, cannot pay the interest for 1 year or cannot pay the complete interest, his interest also starts piling on. So this actually leads to an entire cycle of debt from which it is very difficult for the farmer to come out. Now, from this debt trap, the middlemen used to have a hold on the farmers. They used to control their accounts. They used to control their payments so much that when a payment was made to the middlemen used to deduct their share first and then give it to the farmer. And in some cases, they did not even give them the payments. They used to give them enough food grains, enough groceries for them to last 2-3 months and just let it be there. So the farmers were entirely dependent on arthyas. Now, what are these new laws doing? These new laws are saying farmers who want to sell through the APMC, through the arthyas, are very well allowed to do so. That's pretty much clear. The APMCs are not going anywhere. But the farmers who think that they have a better shot at making more money, say by selling wheat only or paddy only, they don't need to grow something else, to a private buyer, which could be Ambani, Adani, it could be a startup run by me with 5 people in a garage, for all I care, or for all the farmer cares. But the government says, sell to whoever you want to. You're not bound by one APMC mechanism. And this is what is troubling the middlemen who are now protesting at Singhu and Tikri border, because they say, how can we let go of a control on the farmers? Because the agri-economy of Punjab is very strong. And this agri-economy facilitates a strong political economy for these middlemen. You do remember Sukhbir Singh Badal saying every farmer is an Akali and every Akali is a farmer. And I'm starting to think if it meant every Arthya is an Akali and every Akali is an Arthya. Because that is the kind of political prominence these middlemen command on the ground. But this is from a policy point of view. Let's even talk about the politics. Now, the Bengal elections happened. Of course, a lot of people were guessing for BJP to win. It did not happen for whatever reasons. That's a topic for a different day. And Nishtha Anushri, my co-worker, has done some splendid videos on the subject. You should really check them out. Nevertheless, BJP has gone from 3 seats in 2016 to almost 76 in 2021. So they have registered a good, strong growth. Now, the 2022 is going to be the Uttar Pradesh elections. Rakesh Tikait is on the ground. Yogendra Yadav is on the ground. And they want to influence the electorate. Now, the results of the local body elections in UP also don't present rather a great picture for the BJP. It rather presents a very grim picture. So the BJP would also want to ensure that these farmers are not going to use this protest to influence the UP election, because the opposition parties know that if BJP comes back and wins UP again under the stellar leadership of Yogi Adityanath, 2024 is a done deal. So it's on everyone's mind. I'm focusing on a bit of the politics of the issue too. And as the summers approach, as the harvesting season finishes, and as the winter approaches this year, the numbers of protesting farmers are only going to grow at Singhu, Tikri and Gazipur border. And one can only hope that the government caters to the law and order situation first and dismisses the irrational demands being made by the middlemen who claim to be farmers. Thank you.